sure this is working. Hello, everyone. Dark Train Films here. Just wanted to give my thoughts on a comic book I just finished up reading, and I'm a little behind the times, obviously, but share it with you. It is Robocop versus Terminator. Woo! Um, I thought it was pretty cool. Uh, in fact, I thought it was really cool. Uh, I can't really, I don't really want to show the book, too much, but it's got really good art and the basic story. And I'll read this to you real quick. See if there's a synopsis. The people that are familiar with this book are probably going to be like, why are you doing this? But people that aren't familiar, I just want to give you a heads up. So essentially, it's a Robocop versus Terminator story. It was published by Dark Horse Comics, and this is a hard copy of the collected books. So I'll read the back real quick. When the human resistance learns that the technology that rebuilt Officer Alex Murphy led to Skynet becoming sentient, its deadliest soldier is sent back in time to stop it. Her mission: eliminate Robocop before his consciousness can give birth to the murderous computer network. But in a bid for self-preservation, Skynet sends its own agents to the past, a squadron of Terminators tasked with protecting Robocop at any cost. Determined to prevent the apocalypse he has precipitated while evading the threat of the rebel soldier after his life, Murphy must engage in a time-twisting battle that will take him both inside Skynet and into a distant future. So, yeah, it was Frank Miller and Walter Simonson, and the artwork is pretty legit. I mean, it's definitely got that old school feel. If I'm not mistaken, it was published in the 90s. So, yeah, I could Wikipedia that and take a look. But um, long story short, I thought it was a good book. I'm a huge fan of Robocop and the Terminator. I lean a little more towards the Terminator just because I had a huge, I'm a big fan of Arnold. I know people make fun of him, and some people make fun of him, and they're just like he can't act and all that stuff. But as a kid, I didn't care. I really liked Arnold. And as RoboCop was actually a lot of fun too. Both of those, and I'm gonna dive into the movies for a minute. The first RoboCop and the first Terminator film, and arguably the second Terminator film, um, and arguably the second RoboCop. Those are very good cyberpunk stories. And but there's time travel involved in one, and just futuristic cop in another. So smashing all that together, there's all kinds of stuff that goes on in this book that you're kind of like scratching your head, but you're also like, well, it is a mashup of two popular properties. But I mean, the artwork was good. I thought it was cool. But diving into the movies for a minute, I think the first RoboCop film is it still stands the test of time. I mean, I know there's a lot of 80s stuff in it that dates it very well, but I think it still holds up. Um, the effects, the suit, the sound design, the editing in that movie is really tight. It's like one of the ultimate '80s movies. But it was great. It was a cop story, and it had like a little bit of an old west feel in some respects. Old west, but you have like a robot cop. It was really neat. And then going to the first Terminator film, I mean, I could talk about that for days, but I'll try and keep it brief. The first Terminator film was really well done. Uh, it was basically a slasher film. It was a slasher film, but instead of Jason Voorhees or Michael Myers, you had an unstoppable robot killing machine. who had time traveled. I mean, just and there's so many paradoxes and things in the whole plot, and a man goes back in time to become his own grandfather, or whatever. However you want to explain that, but I think the main thing about um, the first Terminator film is that it was a low budget film that had like a B. It was kind of a B movie, plot. But James Cameron pulled off a lot of cool stuff because he knew what he wanted, and he got a lot of it just by being stubborn. I can relate to that. Being stubborn about something, even if you're not very good, if you're stubborn and you persist, eventually things will fall into place. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes. So anyway, this is kind of random. I didn't know. I've never done a comic book review before, but I thought the artwork in this was really good. Some of it is a little. There's a lot of fire and blood and explosions and all kinds of cool stuff. I mean, like every page is packed with action and cyberpunky stuff. RoboCop looks really good. You know, drawn this way. There was there was a panel that actually made me laugh out loud. It was funny. There's like a fight that happens near a hospital, and in the hospital, like RoboCop's fighting. I think RoboCop is fighting one of the Terminators, and there's somebody operating. I mean, look at this. This is really good. There's somebody operating on a patient. Oh, here it is. I have to show this panel because it made me laugh. So I don't know if you can see this, but oops, I got to turn my power on. Oop. There we go. So, RoboCop and Terminator in a fist fight. They're punching each other. They're punching a bit, and then there's a big smash, and the wall gets busted open. They say, "We're all gonna die!" Yeah, there's somebody being operated on. I thought that was hilarious because there's a guy operating trying to save somebody's life, and then there's a big fight going on. I just thought it was hilarious. This has a lot of humor built into it, which I like. There's some really cool artwork like this, where Murphy merges and becomes one with Skynet, and just really cool stuff. Anyway, long story short, I think it was a good book. I think it's worth a read. I was not really a comic book collector when I was growing up, which is ironic because I'm attracted to comic book stories and I'm attracted to the art, but I usually lived vicariously through my friends who were able to purchase comics. I know that sounds kind of weird, but like I'd ask them, it's like, so who's this character? What's his powers? And then they'd be like, oh, and then they would kind of just it was a good way to start a conversation with people that were kind of introverted. And now comic books are like, a big deal and everybody's got one. And I mean, not everybody, but it feels like that comic books are still kind of a go-to. There's something cool about, you know, holding the book in your hands and being able to take your time and, look at the book. And then it's like, wait, what happened here? And then you go back and you can say, oh, yeah, that's right. You can go back and forth and do that. And some of the imagery and the stuff is really gorgeous. But I had fun reading this. It was I've always wanted to read it, and I never had a copy. I actually got this copy at the library, so I do have to return it. But I enjoyed it. I thought it was really cool. The art's really good. The story is, um, I mean, it's kind of all over the place in some respects, but I enjoyed it. Um, so nobody's watching this right now, but I'll post it for later. So that's kind of a rough, basic review of RoboCop versus Terminator. I thought the ending it seemed to have like a few different endings, so it kind of like it had like a few. It seemed like okay, now this book is over, and I feel the pages like, oh, there's about 16 more pages. I guess there's another ending. Um, so I thought it was really cool how um, you take these two iconic properties, you put it in a snazzy, shoot from the hip comic book. You put Frank Miller on it, um, and Walter Simonson, and I'm obviously a little more familiar with Frank Miller, who was actually in the film RoboCop 2, you know, and he wrote a script and all that. So, but I think, uh, I think the idea of like these metal warriors and RoboCop kind of being like a man out of time, he kind of becomes the Kyle Reese character of this story in a way, but he's also super badass. I mean, he's RoboCop, so he's got the ability. But he does. I mean, he does get his ass handed to him by the Terminators a couple times, and there's some dark stuff in this. It's like a roller coaster ride. Let's put it that way. That'd be the best way to describe it. It's a fun cyberpunk roller coaster ride. So if you haven't read it, I highly recommend you see it. I think it'd make a great animation. If anybody knows if this has been animated, that would be cool. I mean, I could probably just do a Google search, but um, I do find it interesting that RoboCop uh, is kind of. It's almost like it's an idea from the '80s, but it kind of keeps coming forward because you know as law enforcement gets a little bit more scrutinized and looked at, that high tech military type, fantasy stuff is kind of popular in video games and such. So, but yeah, anyways, that's it. Hope you guys are having a good day, and I'll do another video later. Cheers.